Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So it appears we left off at verse text, what is it, 38? That was the last one we read. So we're on text 39. And then I guess, let's see, how many do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we'll read to text 6 in the other part. All right. Avritam jnanametena jnanino nityabhairina kamarupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. Thus a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. Indriyani manobhudhir asyadishtanam uchyate etavimohayatyesha jnanam avritya dehinam. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. Text 41. Tasma tvam indriyanyadho niyamya bharatarshabha papamanang prajahiyanam jnana vijnana nashanam. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curve this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses, and slay the destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Text 42. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhyah parang manah manasastu parabhudhir yo bhudev paratastu saha. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind. And he, the soul, is even higher than the intelligence. Text 43. Evam bhudev parang bhudva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahi shatrung mahabhaho kamarupang durasadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher self, and thus, by spiritual strength, conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. Call the enemy what it is, right? Transcendental Knowledge, Chapter 4. This is a nice chapter. Text 1. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Imang Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Aham Avyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Mano Ishvakave Bhravet. The Blessed Lord said, I instructed this imperishable science of yoga to the sun god Vivasvan, and Vivasvan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. Text 2. Evang parampara praptam imang rajarshayo viduhu sakalene mahata yoga nashta parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Text 3. Saevayang maya tedya yoga prokta puratanaha bhakto sime sakha cheti rahasyang yetar uttamam. In that very ancient science of the relationship with the Supreme is today told by me to you, because you are my devotee as well as my friend. Therefore, you can understand the transcendental mystery of this science. Text 4. Arjuna vacha aparang bhavato janma parang janma vivasvataha katam etar vijaniyang tvam adho proktavaniti. Arjuna said, the sun god Vivasvan is senior by birth to you. How am I to understand that in the beginning you instructed this science to him? Text 5. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha bahuni me vyatitani janmani tava charjuna tanyaham veda sarvani natvang veta parantapa. The blessed Lord said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. Text 6 is the last verse for today. Ajopi sang avyayatma bhutanam ishvaropi san pakriting swam adishtaya sambhavamyatma mayaya. Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all sentient beings, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. So we'll text back to chapter 3, text 39. Thus, a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and which burns like fire. So, Krishna is concluding his point of the previous verse, how he was explaining how, or what exactly the enemy is, and how it covers the living entity to different degrees, different thickness of this lust the living entity is covered. And you remember the examples Krishna gave? Embryo in the womb is covered by what? The embryo. Okay. Mirror covered by dust. Fire covered by smoke. So these are different examples. Nice. So in this verse, he's just concluding his points. Because he said, the enemy is lust, which is born out of Geo. What does Krishna say? You can look, no problem. This is open book exam. Anyone else? Contact with material modes of passion. Okay. So there we go. And now let's read what this verse has to say. It is said in the Manusmriti that lust cannot be satisfied by any amount of sense enjoyment, just like fire is never extinguished by a constant supply of fuel. In the material world, the center of all activities is sex, and thus this material world is called Maitunya Agara, or the shackles of sex life. In the ordinary prison house, criminals are kept within the bars. Similarly, the criminals who are disobedient to the laws of God are shackled by sex life. Advancement of material civilization is on the basis of sense gratification. Let's read it. Advancement of material civilization on the basis of sense gratification means increasing the duration of the material existence of the living entity. Therefore, this lust is the symbol of ignorance by which the living entity is kept within the material world. While one enjoys sense gratification, it may be that there is some feeling of happiness, but actually that so-called feeling of happiness is the ultimate enemy of the sense enjoyer. Any questions or comments on this? We'll entertain questions first. If there's not a question.
Hare Krishna. So it seems pretty clear what's being said here is that lust does not make us happy, but still we can't give it up. Why?
Because the living entity, this lust, as was revealed in some previous purports, is actually love transformed into lust. So, you either have love or you have lust. And anyone know the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the definition of lust and love?
Wanting to serve the senses of oneself is called lust, and wanting to serve the senses of Krishna is called love.
Yes. Atmendriya priti bhancha. What is it? Tare bholo kam. What's the next line? Anyone else? Krishnendriya priti dhare. Is it? No. Krishnendriya priti. Can't remember the next line. Yeah, you can look it up. Krishnendriya priti. Anyways, but the point is, Atmendriya priti vancha tare bholo kam. This desire to satisfy the self or the senses is lust. And Krishnendriya priti vancha, there you go, that's what it is, vancha. Krishnendriya priti vancha dhare, is it? What's it?
Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi Lila 4.165. Atmendriya priti vancha thare bali kama Krishnendriya priti icha dhare preme nam. Prema.
Icha, yeah, icha dvesha samutena dvanda mohena bharata. So this desires, ultimately, the living entity is full of desire. So it's either full of desire to satisfy his own senses or full of desire to please Krishna. And depending on which desires you have, it is called lust or it is called love. But the desire has to be there. So we have to transform all these desires to enjoy separately from Krishna, to please Krishna, or to be happy with Krishna being happy. But there's no getting rid of it. To serve Krishna, that no more lust will be there actually. So in fact, if we have lust still, that means we have scope for increasing our love for Krishna still. There's more scope for that lust to be transformed for intense desire to serve and please Krishna. And of course we know please Krishna means please Krishna, his devotees, etc. Krishna is never alone. So there's no getting rid of it. We just simply have to transform this eternal enemy in this state. It's considered an enemy for the conditioned soul because it keeps us here in this world. So let's read some more, unless someone has some questions. Yes, I see a red. Did I saw a hand on this side also? No.
There's certain things that we're lusty for that seems like it can't be transformed into Krishna's service. How do we understand these things properly? Like, how do we actually not try to like run away from that lust and that propensity, but actually transform it into service?
So you're saying certain things that you desire for yourself cannot be used for Krishna's service. Okay, so how do we turn this into lust? Luckily, we'll be reading about this very shortly. So let's move on. The senses, the mind, and the intelligence are the sitting places of this lust, which veils the real knowledge of the living entity and bewilders him. The enemy has captured different strategic positions in the body of the conditioned soul. Therefore, Lord Krishna is giving hints of those places, so that one who wants to conquer the enemy may know where he can be found. Mind is the center of all the activities of the senses, and thus the mind is the reservoir of all ideas of sense gratification. And as a result, the mind and the senses become repositories of lust. Next, the intelligence department becomes the capital of such lustful propensities. Intelligence is the immediate next door neighbor of the spirit soul. Lusty intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego. and identify itself with matter. Honestly, you have to read this like 100 times. That's the only way you can understand this. It's like so confusing when the first time you read it. I literally, you have to just keep reading it and it's like, wait a second, what? It doesn't even make any sense. But as you read it and you keep in mind which each thing is doing, then it starts to make sense. Thus, the intelligence influences the spirit soul to acquire the false ego and identify itself with matter, and thus with the mind and senses. The spirit soul becomes addicted to enjoying the material senses and mistakes this as true happiness. This false identification of the spirit soul is very nicely explained in Srimad Bhagavatam. Yasyatmi bhudi kunapetri dhatuke svadhi kalatradishu bhauma ijadi yatirtha bhude shalite nakarhichit janeshu abhigyeshu sa eva gokarahang. A human being who identifies this body made of three elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of the body to be his kinsman, who considers the land of birth as worshipable, and who goes to the place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath, rather than meet men of transcendental knowledge there, is to be considered as an ass or a cow. Maharaj, some?
I need my speaker. Oh, I have it, okay. Ready? Just to comment on the point about that nice verse, how love is the original nature of the soul, but it turns to lust. Like we could use the example of grape juice. It's very nice if you drink grape juice. It's good for the brain and very nice for the health. But if you leave it and it ferments, then it acts in a different way. It makes one act crazy and loses intelligence and everything when it becomes an intoxicant. So that same love, when one comes in contact with the material energy, it becomes transformed into lust. So there is a procedure how to bring it back to pure love, and that's bhakti yoga, that's devotional service. And if one practices that in the proper way, following the instructions of the Shastras and the Guru and the Vaishnavas, then he'll be able to turn back that lust, that becomes transformed back into the real thing, the purified thing, which is love for Krishna. Thank you.
Jai. Thank you, Maharaj. Best Materna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So I was wondering about this verse this morning that's here in text 40 that you just read, as a human being who identifies with his body, etc. Would this be the same as like somebody who comes to the temple just to take prasad or just to see the deity and not, associate with devotees at all, not try to, get proper association?
Well, sometimes it's used in this context that neophyte devotees more or less are like an ass or a cow. It's like a ritual for them. They just go to the temple, take prasadam, but they're not interested in actually the purpose of the temple, which is to learn about one's relationship with Krishna and the process by which one develops or deepens that relationship, which is bhakti yoga. And they're not interested in associating with those who are practicing Krishna consciousness. So yeah, those who are on the neophyte level, they're more or less on like animals. So sometimes it's used like this, that if a devotee simply goes on pilgrimage, but he forgets that the real purpose or what really makes a place of pilgrimage is actually those sadhus who are there, and associate with them, then they're more or less like an ass. So we have to get essentially more attached to Krishna, and associating with devotees who have more attachment to Krishna or their faith is deeper, then That's the secret, how we make progress in our devotional service. And we hear from them submissively. We render service to them, as will be revealed in the next chapter. Tadvidi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya upadikshanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshinaha. Krishna later tells Arjuna, yeah, there's so many authorized processes even within the scriptures, but how do you know essentially what path you should take? You should surrender to a guru who have actually seen the truth. He can actually instruct you properly according to your circumstance. He understands the need of the hour, and not just within the age itself, and not just within the age, but within the certain part of this planet, and not just in this part of this planet, but the country, not this country, but state, etc. He takes everything into consideration and instructs you accordingly. Yes.
So Maharaj has a comment on uh, 4:6. I'll read the translation.
4:6.
Although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all sentient beings, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form.
The volume went down.
I just read the translation.
So why does Krishna appear in every millennium? Because of his causeless mercy. He's coming to the material world, not because he wants to enjoy matter. He has everything he needs in the spiritual world. The concerts are very beautiful there. Food is delight. Everything's nice. But he comes to the material world out of compassion, dwelling in the hearts of all living entities, and he displays his pastimes. And these pastimes are so powerful that they can actually bring about a change of heart in the living entities by hearing of them, or by learning about them, or anything in relationship with Krishna's appearance. Tanma karma chame divyam evam yo vedi tattvataha chakva deham punar janma naiti mamiti sojana. Krishna says, one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not take birth again when he gives up this body, but comes back to me. That means these remembering Krishna's activities, pastimes, and form, etc., is so powerful that it can completely change the direction of one's destiny. So this is a destiny maker. We have this human form of life. If we use it for learning about Krishna and learning to love Krishna and serve him, then we perfect ourselves and we're eligible to go back to Godhead. Thank you.
John. Thank you, Maharaj. So we'll read the next verse and then we'll speak some. Therefore, Arjuna, best of the Bharatas in the very beginning, curbed this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So here, this is your answer. And Maharaj already pointed out. By regulating the senses in Bhakti Yoga is how we can curb this lust, or this great symbol of sin. It's interesting how it's very clear what is sinful, actually. And that is any selfishness or any sense gratification that we do is ultimately sin. It's actually, therefore, sin is actually not good for us, ultimately. You may think, oh, sinful, we're hurting someone else. That's there. But ultimately, we're hurting ourselves, because this is the world of karma, in which you cannot actually do anything to anyone else which they don't actually deserve. You're just an instrument of their karma. Krishna will not allow. The laws of nature gives everyone exactly what they deserve. based on their previous actions. So we go to a place where we can only hurt ourselves, and that's this material world. And when we commit any selfish actors, then we're held accountable for that. And we have to suffer more, ultimately. So we can curve this tendency or this great wave of lust by diverting its current towards devotional service. So it's not necessarily what you're desiring for yourself that really matters, that you have to dovetail that particularly to in devotional service, but you have to just shift the principle. The principle is, instead of acting for yourself, you start acting for Krishna more and more. And there's unlimited services by which we can do in Krishna consciousness. And as our desire for Krishna increases more, or our desire to serve Krishna and give him more, then naturally our desire for our own satisfaction will feel an impediment, and we will want to give it up. Because the moment you have to think about yourself or your selfish desires and satisfy them, your mind is diverted for that fraction of a second, or whatever it may be. Sometimes that fraction of a second may take you a whole nother life, to a whole nother life. You get diverted. And you're like, whoa, I wanted to fulfill this small desire, but now you're entangled in so many other activities because of it. So, therefore, we should not play around with fire, right? You don't want to add more fuel to the fire. So there has to be some sort of regulation for the human being. It's not an animal. You can't just gratify every desire you feel. It's like, that's the difference, Prabhupada says, between an animal and a human being. I think you often quote this lecture, right? Prabhupada makes this point. As an animal, you put some nice food stuff, the animal cannot control. He'll say, I'm going to eat this. But a human being, he's some discretion. He says, hold on. This might belong to someone else, you know? Or you might say, there's other people here. There's other people who live here. Hold on. You know? So this is a human being. He has that ability to say, hold on. Although you initially say, wow, and you hold on. You know, hold on. Despite having the desire, we stop ourselves. You know? And actually that's what happens at first in Krishna consciousness. Before, we may not have done like that. Whatever we wanted, we said, I'm going to get it no matter what happens. We'll find some crooked way to do it. But then we come to Krishna and say, hold on. Actually, let me stop for a second. At least we're at that stage. We're like, we have the unlimited desire, but we're like, hold on. You know, there's somebody else I have to consider. This is going to affect this person. Like this is a human being. He begins to restrict himself. He knows better. He may desire the wrong thing, but his intelligence kicks in. And he says, hold on. Previously, I may have just ran and did this nonsense thing, or, you know, immediately done it without even thinking. But now, hold on. It's like, you know, despite having the intense desire to do the wrong thing sometimes. And we know, we're not pretenders to be thinking that we're absolutely pure and we desire only the right thing at every moment. No, a lot of times our minds may desire so many nonsense things, but we know, hold on, this is, you know, I'm a human being, you know, some discretion should be there. I'm not an animal. I'm just going to enjoy my senses at whatever, you know, inclination the mind or body desires. And it happens with small things. And then also we'll be able to curve the bigger things also. But at least we should be able to curve the big things first. No illicit sex, no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling. But then it becomes finer and finer, you know. Okay, just take prasadam as much as you want to your full satisfaction, whatever your definition of full satisfaction is. Don't worry too much. But gradually you figure it out. It's okay. If you're intelligent, Prabhupada says in my lecture, you will not overeat, actually. You're intelligent. If you're not intelligent, okay, you'll overeat. You'll get punished by material nature. As soon as you overeat, mention says, like, here, indigestion, stomach pain, all these things. Because you're less intelligent. But gradually, you realize, you know, okay, should not overeat. This is not good for my health, for this body's health. So, like this, we learn, or we shouldn't, you know, unnecessarily indulge in looking at this thing, or then we know, okay, so we curve ourselves little by little. But the best curve is to increase. Without increasing our desire to serve Krishna, there's no question of curving these things. It's just artificial. We have to serve Krishna and develop strong desire to please the devotees. And we do that by becoming more attached to Krishna through the process of bhakti yoga, which is ado shraddha tata sadhu sangata bhajana kriya tarto narta neveshitta tato ruchi satasaha ata sakti tato bhava tata prema vidanchati. Then we get a little faith, a little interest in Krishna consciousness at first, right? Ado shraddha, then sadhu sangha. We start associating with those people who we're interested in and curious, and because they're practicing devotional service, we take shelter of the spiritual master. This is sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya. They engage us in some service. Spiritual master says, okay, serve like this, do like this, don't do like this. And we start serving. Then anartha nivritti starts happening. As we do anartha nivritti, we become fixed, nishta. And after nishta, then we get a taste in devotional service. Of course, that taste is there from the very beginning, but in a subtle way. But at this point, subtle, this taste becomes really strong. It becomes concrete, hard, like boiled down sugar or boiled down milk starts to turn into burfi, right? You ever boiled down milk? 2, 3, after 1 hour, 2 hours, starts getting thick. And you're like, oh man, this is going to be really nice. For Krishna, nice, thick burfi, right? It's a nice meditation when you're cooking down burfi. It's a process, especially if you want to do it nice and you don't want to burn it. Then you really got to like pay attention to it, you know, or else it gets burnt. You gotta be very careful. You're more attentive as the process becomes closer. It's not you're less attentive. You're like, all right, any slip up, boom, you're burnt. So actually we see devotees who've been around for a long time, they become more attentive. It's not they become less attentive or less conscious in their practice. They become more attentive to the little details of things. And I see this, everything matters to them because Prabhupada actually said this to one disciple. She was doing an arti, and Prabhupada was paying attention to what she was doing, very consciously of what she was doing. And she was wondering why. And Prabhupada said to the devotee, everything matters, actually. That was his reply. Everything is important, because it's ultimately is meant for Krishna. Maya tatamidam sarvam jagat avyaktamurtina. Krishna is all pervasive in his devotional service also. So therefore, the devotee becomes very conscious as he makes progress, because he's now conscious for Krishna. Versus being conscious in the material is very painful. When you're conscious for yourself, it's very painful. You run into problems because now you're using your consciousness. Why? For your own sense aggrandizement, to try to exploit this world. But now, because it's for Krishna, being conscious is not a painful thing. We don't try to drown our consciousness or try to turn down our consciousness. No, we become more conscious. Why? Because it's for Krishna, for his service. So we see that. Prabhupada was super conscious. Nothing went by Prabhupada's eye without him noticing. He was very meticulous. That was very detail-oriented, very clean, sattva gun, very naturally like this. Why did this happen? Because of his intense Krishna consciousness, not because he was attached to the mode of goodness for his own enjoyment. I like being clean and peaceful. Like my mother, she's like one of the most cleanest princesses I know. But she's not, devotee. She just likes that. She has a taste for that kind of thing. But the devotee, he's not doing it just because he likes it. He likes it because Krishna likes it. There's a big difference. A world of a difference. It's not, I like being in the mode of goodness. Krishna likes things nicely clean, nicely ordered, organized, systematic. And it's for Krishna's service, so let me do it properly. So that's why he likes it. So it's a big difference versus I like it because it makes me feel good. I'm in this consciousness. It's just another sense gratification. His mode of goodness is mixed with passion and ignorance. Ignorance, you don't know who you're doing it for. And passion, you're doing it for yourself. But the devotee, he's doing it for Krishna, and therefore he's not doing it for himself. And he's conscious it's for Krishna. So he's not tinged by these lower modes. So it behooves us to increase our devotional service. I'll just read one line from this purport, and then we'll move on. Lust is only a perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. And that's exactly what we mentioned. that it's only a perverted reflection of love of God. Therefore, you cannot ever get rid of it. It's eternally there. But sometimes when the living entity comes in contact with the material modes of nature, it becomes manifest. So Prabhupada in one lecture gives the example of like anger. Anger is there, but it's not physically manifested right now. But the moment something that makes you angry comes in, then you manifest that anger. Oh, where'd that come from? It's always been there. So, like that. So sometimes we still have lust and we wonder, whoa, where'd this come from? Oh, it's always been there, blah, blah. You just not, you didn't know until something came in contact with you and then you realize, oh, I still have work to do. So let's keep reading the last two verses. The working senses are superior to dull matter. Mind is higher than the senses. Intelligence is still higher than the mind, and he, the soul, is even higher than intelligence. So Krishna is here giving us some hierarchy, and in the purport, he shows us how to engage each aspect. Because remember earlier, 2 verses ago, Krishna told us where lust actually sits. It captures the living entities in different areas, in the mind, in the senses, in the intelligence. So therefore, we have to use all these things in Krishna's service. Whatever you don't use, it will pull you. It will pull you, actually. At some point, you'll be weak in that area. So here Krishna is talking about 4 different things: the senses, the mind, the intelligence, and the soul. All these things we have to be conscious of in devotional service, that are engaged. We have proper, sufficient engagement for the senses. And how do we engage the senses? Some bodily function. We engage the senses by working for Krishna. The mind, Prabhupada writes, how? The mind by making plans for Krishna. And the intelligence by making discrimination, taking some knowledge, we strengthen our intelligence, and we realize, I'm not this soul. I'm not this body. I am the soul, eternal servant of Krishna. And therefore, then the soul engages in devotional service. It becomes strong, and mostly strengthened by association with Krishna. That's what Prabhupada writes at the end of this purport, is that the soul gets strengthened by association with Krishna. We have to chant the holy names. If we stop chanting, we become weak, spiritually weak. You stop for like 1 week. Of course, I'm not recommending this. Just stop for 1 week. No, but 1 week, okay, you might survive. 1 week after that, you're going to be the greatest Rakshasa again. You're going to be doing things you never thought you'd be doing. Probably even worse. So, that's what happens, actually. I've seen some people take up Krishna consciousness. If they leave, they become worse than they ever were before. It's like, what happened to you? They went in the complete opposite direction. Because now they're so inimical to God that they're really trying to block him out by committing the most abominable things to try to justify their conception that he doesn't exist. Right? With intense hedonism. But then they suffer a lot, actually. And it's unfortunate. So, if we engage in devotional service, then automatically, actually, all these things become engaged, because the senses start working for Krishna. The mind, you have to plan to do your services. Intelligence, you have to discriminate. You have to make decisions. This requires the intelligence to play a part. You can't just be dull in devotional service. And then without chanting the holy name, our service anyways won't be accepted properly. So we have to keep chanting Krishna's name, especially in Kali Yuga. So we'll move on. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher self, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So there's no getting rid of it, and there's no satisfying lust. There's only transforming this lust, purifying. Again, lust is just what we call desire for ourselves. It's the same desire. But if that desire now is for Krishna and serving Krishna, we call it love. But still, it's desire. So we just have to change our desires, purify our desires, Prabhupada was saying. Instead of desiring so many nonsense things for me, we realize actually I'm meant to desire everything in relationship to Krishna. Yes?
What does it look like to cultivate desires? What is the mechanism?
Well, we cultivate desires by accepting those desires that come through the Guru Parampara. Shutti smiti pranadi pancharatra vidimbina ikantike hare bhakti utpaya kalpate. I always mention this verse, but devotional service is on the foreground of the Vedic scriptures. And particularly, not just the Vedic scriptures, but what the Guru has ordained for us, our immediate authorities under the direction of the spiritual master. We should take those desires and make it one with our heart. Should make it our desires. Because really, when we're pure, what is the living entity made out of? What makes the living entity different from matter is this desires. Matter cannot desire. So a conditioned living entity desires nonsense or sense gratification or things for himself. A pure living entity is just surcharged with desires of Krishna. Right? And Krishna desired to enjoy. He expanded himself. Right? Anandomaya bhyasat. So all those living entities expanded themselves, they were meant to be surcharged with the same Krishna's desires. And they were supposed to perfectly serve Krishna. But some of them become covered over because of misusing their independence. And now this same desire is pervertedly reflected in the material world. So, but when we become pure, we'll be surcharged, every being, with desires to serve Krishna. So if we just take the instructions of the spiritual master, we'll be perfect, because the spiritual master knows how to engage us properly according to our proclivities. He'll see, okay, this devotee can do like this, or this devotee can't do like this. And he tries to engage him accordingly. And we have to use our intelligence and relieve our doubts with the spiritual master. And he'll help us engage in Krishna's service. And then that's the only way. That's why spiritual strength comes from following. Determination comes from following the order of the spiritual master. By adhering very strongly, then we're able to overcome all our selfish tendencies. But we have to know that we have to overcome them. It's not going to happen by chance or some magic. Or like Krishna's not going to like wave some wand. He's going to point it out. He's going to show you again and again. Here you are. Here are your faults. Deshamivanu partam aham agyana jam tamaham nashayami atma bhavasto jnana dipena bhasvata. With the shining lamp of knowledge, he'll show you and destroy your ignorance. What are we ignorant for? We don't know what's wrong with us, actually. That's the first ignorance. That's the first level of ignorance that we have. We don't know our anarthas. But as we perform sincere devotional service, this is the key, sincere. If it's performed sincerely, you will see your faults, actually. But if it's performing with pride, with ego, with the desire to be, fame, name, adoration, distinction, then you will not see your faults, actually. You always try to cover them. You'll be blind to them. With sincere devotional service, you'll run into your faults and you'll see them. Krishna will allow you to see them so that you can actually work on them. And every one of us know at least one thing that we're doing wrong or that we need to improve. How do I know? Because if we're serving Krishna, he'll show us at least one thing that we're always running into this thing, this problem, and we can work on it. Make some plans in devotee association under the spiritual master guidance. He can help us overcome our anarthas, whatever they may be. We can admit them to some authority and say, this is my anartha. I keep doing this thing. Is there any solution to this? I keep doing this, again and again. And the thing is, if we project our life as, I'm going to give my whole life to Krishna, then it's kind of like, okay, I have some time to sincerely practice and really see what my faults are. It's not like I'm doing part-time devotional service where every time something gets difficult, I run away, I run away from this problem, run away from this. But you have time to actually see, okay, this is the problem I keep running into within myself. I'm shying away from this or whatever the case may be. And I see, this is very practical. Any of us have some experience of this. If you perform devotional service after some time, you'll see there's something that you have to work on. And spiritual master is ready to guide us. Other devotees are ready to guide us because, we have similar anarthas. We have similar difficulties. So that's why Krishna says, take this knowledge that comes in disciplic succession, as will be stated. That's the only way you can actually do proper karma yoga, is if you take some knowledge along with acting for Krishna and engaging your senses for Krishna. Because we're in this conditioned world. Why? Ultimately because of desires. We desire to be in here. There's a nice picture in the Bhagavad Gita. It shows us Bayan tree and the river that it's reflected, this perverted reflection. Maybe, is it in this one? Yeah. So it's in plate 35, we see it. And there's this river by which it's reflecting. It's called desire. Right? We desire. So to fulfill these desires, we need to do some karma. Krishna says, okay, work. And if you do karma, you get some fruit. And if you desire that fruit, you're bound. Now you have to enjoy that fruit. But the devotee says, okay, I'm not free from these negative desires, and I still want to act, but at least let me not enjoy the fruit anymore. Give it to Krishna. Become detached from the fruit. At least at this third stage, you get, you still have desires, okay, but do it for Krishna. Work for Krishna. Instead of that same work you were doing to you enjoy the fruit, now instead you start offering that fruit to Krishna little by little. Okay, I wanted to work and get a job and make some money. But instead of enjoying all the money to yourself, you say, I'm going to offer some to Krishna, the fruit. You start becoming detached from the fruit. Whatever result we're getting. Of course, sometimes for us, it may seem a little difficult. It's like, we're not making any money, so what do I offer to Krishna? Huh? I'm not making any money. I'm not getting paid for this. But we get there's always some result for any activity you do. But you have to start doing it for Krishna. It's for his pleasure, for the devotee's pleasure. Whatever it is. Any work you do, say, okay, little by little. It may be the smallest things, but it makes a world of a difference. Actually, when you start acting less for yourself and more for the devotees and more for Krishna. And if you develop a sincere desire, you will gradually become absolutely disgusted with your desire, your selfish desires. Prabhupada writes in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when you see what real love is in the spiritual world, you will hate all sense gratification. You will hate it. You will be adverse to it. What's that verse? Yadavadi mama cheta Krishna padara vinde nava nava rasya dhamni udatam ratum asit. And let me see if I can look it up real quick. Okay. Tadavadi patanari sangame smaryamane bhavati mukha vikara sushtu nishtivanam cha. This is, since my mind has been engaged in transcendental loving service of Krishna, or relishing transcendental lovers of Krishna, and Krishna again doesn't just mean Krishna by himself, just Krishna and his devotees, specifically his topmost devotees. Since you've been relishing and understanding this and appreciating what is real love, which love in the spiritual means everything for Krishna. They're sacrificing everything, their false ego, prestige, everything for the pleasure of Krishna. No concept of I or myself anymore. Just give all that up and give it all to Krishna. When they start relishing, wow, these devotees are such amazing examples that they gave up everything. They didn't care just to please Krishna. When we become attracted to that, we'll hate the idea of like, oh, I'm doing this out of this. We'll start to feel, oh, this is gross. This is not actually love. This is selfish. And then when we develop some love for Krishna, then we can actually love, we can have proper loving relationships with each other. We can love through Krishna, not without Krishna. So we'll end there because Srimad Bhagavad Gita is endless. We can speak about this for the rest of the night and it still won't be enough time. So we'll end there tonight. Thank you for your kind attention. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnava.